Most people are living the wrong life, not because they chose it, but because nobody ever told them they had a choice. Right now, somewhere in this world, a person is waking up at 6 in the morning, hitting the alarm, dragging themselves through a routine they hate, telling themselves this is just how it is. This is just life. You work, you survive, you get by. And I want you to stop right there. Because I have spent 40 years of my life sitting across from presidents, billionaires, athletes, and people who had nothing. And I can tell you with absolute certainty, the difference between a person who changes everything and a person who changes nothing is not talent. It is not luck. It is not timing. It is one decision. One moment where something shifts inside you and you say, not tomorrow, not when things get better, not when the kids grow up, not when I get the raise. Right now, today, this moment, that is what this conversation is about. Not motivation. Motivation fades by Tuesday. What I want to give you today goes deeper than motivation. I want to show you the mechanism, the actual invisible force that determines why some people break through and why others stay stuck, not for a week, not for a year, but for their entire life. Stay with me. Let me tell you about a man I met in Chicago about 20 years ago. He was 43 years old, worked the same job for 17 years, came home every night to the same chair, same television, same feeling in his chest that he could not name. He was not in crisis. He was not suffering in the way you can point to. He was just empty. We sat together for about 2 hours. And at one point I asked him, what do you actually want? Not what is realistic. Not what makes sense. What do you want? He looked at me like no one had ever asked him that before. And maybe no one had. See, most people spend their whole life managing expectations instead of expanding them. They take the dream they had at 22 and slowly, carefully, they shrink it. They file the edges down. They make it fit the box that life has handed them. And they call that growing up. I call that giving up. There is a force inside every human being. Scientists call it neuroplasticity. Psychologists call it self-efficacy. I just call it the hunger. And when you feed it, it grows. When you starve it, it does not simply disappear. It turns inward. It becomes self-destruction. It becomes the voice that tells you it is too late, you are too old, you missed your window, someone else gets to have that life but not you. That voice is lying to you. Let me show you why. The human brain is not a fixed machine. For most of recorded history, science believed that the brain you were born with was the brain you were going to die with. Damage it and it was damaged. Limit it and it stayed limited. Your personality, your beliefs, your emotional patterns, those were thought to be set in stone by the time you reached adulthood. We now know that is completely false. Neurologists at Harvard, at Stanford, at institutions across the world have now proven that the brain rewires itself based on what you consistently do, what you consistently think, and what you consistently feel. Every repeated thought carves a deeper groove in your neural architecture. Every new behavior, even a small one, begins building a new pathway. This is not philosophy. This is biology, which means the story you tell yourself about who you are, it is not the truth. It is a habit, and habits can be changed. I met a woman in London several years ago who had spent 31 years believing she was not creative. She had been told as a child, you are the smart one, your sister is the creative one, and she carried that sentence like a stone in her pocket for 3 decades. She built a career, raised a family, lived a full and respectable life, all while carrying this quiet grief for the version of herself she believed she could never be. At 54, she picked up a paintbrush. Not because something magical happened, not because she found permission. She picked it up because she finally decided that a sentence spoken to a 7-year-old by a tired parent was not the final word on what she was capable of. 18 months later, her work was in a gallery in Edinburgh. The brain had not changed its capacity. She had changed her relationship to possibility. That is what I want you to hear right now. Here is what I know about potential. Potential is not a resource that some people have and others do not. Potential is not distributed at birth like eye color or height. Potential is the gap between where you are and what you are capable of, and that gap does not close with age. In many ways, if you know how to work with your mind, it expands. But here is the problem. Between you and your potential, there are 3 invisible walls. Most people never see them. They spend their lives walking into these walls and then concluding that the walls are just reality, that this is just how far they can go. The first wall is identity. The second wall is certainty. The third wall is association. Let me break these down for you because once you can name them, they lose their power. Identity is the story you have decided is true about who you are. I am not good with money. I am not a morning person. I am shy. I am not technical. I have never been athletic. I am not the kind of person who succeeds at things like that. Notice how all of those sentences, every single one, is told in the present tense as if it is a permanent fact about the universe. It is not. It is a conclusion you drew from a handful of past experiences and then elevated to the status of law. And once something becomes law in your mind, you stop testing it. You stop questioning it. You just organize your life around it. I grew up poor, not just tight budget poor. I mean the kind of poor where the electricity gets cut off, where there is no food in the house on Thanksgiving, where you learn very early that money is something other people have. That was my story. That was my identity for years. And then I made a different decision, not a decision about money, a decision about identity. I decided that my past was not my future, that the story of where I came from did not have to be the story of where I was going. And the moment I made that shift, not over years, not gradually, the moment I made it, everything began to change. Your identity is not a discovery, it is a choice. And you can choose again. Certainty is the second wall, and this one is sneaky. See, the human brain is wired to protect you. It is a survival machine. And uncertainty feels like danger to the primitive parts of your neurology. When you do not know what is going to happen, your brain sounds an alarm. Stay here. Stay where it is familiar. Stay where you know the outcome, even if the outcome is painful. Because pain you know is safer than possibility you do not. Think about that for a second. People stay in relationships they hate because the certainty of that relationship feels safer than the uncertainty of being alone, of starting over, of not knowing who they are without that person. People stay in jobs they despise for the same reason. People stay inside the size of life they have always lived because the discomfort of smallness is at least a discomfort they recognize. But here is what I need you to understand. Growth does not live in certainty. Growth lives in the place your brain is calling danger. Every single person you admire, every person who has ever built something extraordinary, changed the game, broken through to a life that seems impossible from where you are standing, they all passed through that zone. Every one of them felt the fear. The difference is they did not let the fear make the decision. I used to tell myself I needed to feel ready. I needed to feel certain before I made the leap. And then I realized certainty is not a starting condition. Certainty is a result. You become certain by doing. You build confidence by acting without it. Action before certainty, that is the code. The third wall is association, and this one will change how you look at your entire life. Jim Rohn, my teacher, my mentor, one of the most extraordinary minds I have ever encountered, said something I have repeated 10,000 times in the last 4 decades. He said, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Most people hear that and they think about friendship. But I want you to think about something deeper. You are not just the average of those 5 people in terms of your bank account or your habits. You are the average of their beliefs, their standards, their level of what they think is possible, their tolerance for discomfort, their relationship with risk. If everyone around you has given up on their dreams, there is social pressure, invisible, constant, never spoken, to give up on yours too. Not because anyone tells you to, but because staying extraordinary in an ordinary environment is an act of daily rebellion, and very few people have the energy for it. This is why environment matters more than willpower. You can have the strongest intentions in the world. You can read every book, attend every seminar, write every goal down in your journal, and then walk back into an environment that punishes those intentions and wonder why nothing changes. You have to engineer your environment. You have to be ruthless about who gets access to you, whose voice gets to live in your head, what you consume, what surrounds you, what you see when you wake up in the morning. This is not elitism. This is self-preservation. Now I want to go deeper because knowing the walls is not enough. Understanding why you are stuck does not automatically unstick you. Understanding is the beginning. But there is a mechanism, an actual repeatable process that changes the equation. I call it the triad. 3 forces working simultaneously that determine your emotional state at any given moment. And here is why this matters. Your emotional state is not just how you feel. Your emotional state determines what you see, what you believe is possible, what actions you take, what you attract, what you repel. Everything flows from your state. The first force is physiology. The second force is focus. The third force is language. Most people think their emotional state is caused by circumstances. Something happens and then they feel a certain way. And that feels completely true. It feels like physics, like gravity, like cause and effect. But it is not. Between the circumstance and the feeling, there is a gap. And in that gap, these three forces are operating. The circumstance does not create the emotion. Your physiology, your focus, and your language create the emotion. And all three of those are within your control. Let me tell you about physiology first, because this is the fastest lever. Right now, wherever you are, whatever you are feeling, your body is communicating to your brain. The way you are sitting, the way you are breathing, the tension you are carrying in your shoulders, your jaw, your chest. Your brain is reading all of it and drawing conclusions. Slumped shoulders, shallow breath, downward gaze. Your brain interprets that as defeat. Chest open, breath full, eyes forward. Your brain interprets that as strength. This sounds too simple, I know. And every person who has heard me say this for the first time has the same reaction. You're telling me my posture changes my life. Not your posture alone, but your physiology is the fastest route to your emotional state, and your emotional state determines everything else. Amy Cuddy at Harvard did research on this. 2 minutes of what she called power posing, expanding your body, opening your chest, standing the way a confident person stands, measurably increased testosterone and decreased cortisol in the body. 2 minutes, your body changes your chemistry changes your perception changes your decisions change your life. So yes, it starts with how you carry yourself. Focus is the second force, and it is where most people lose years of their life. Where focus goes, energy flows. And where energy flows, results grow. I have said that for 40 years because it is absolutely, irrefutably true. Whatever you focus on consistently, you find evidence for. This is not mysticism. This is the reticular activating system, the part of your brain that filters reality and decides what to show you from the 10 million bits of information hitting your senses every second. You decide to buy a red car, and suddenly red cars are everywhere. Did the red cars multiply overnight? No. Your brain simply started showing you what you told it to look for. Apply that to your beliefs. If you focus on all the reasons you cannot, you will find them. They will be everywhere. Every setback will confirm the story. Every obstacle will be evidence. And you will conclude that the problem is the world when the actual problem is the filter you put on the world. Change your focus and you change your evidence. Change your evidence and you change your belief. Change your belief and you change your action. Change your action and you change your life. But here is the critical question that most people never ask. What are you consistently focused on? Not occasionally, consistently. The pattern of what occupies your mind in the morning before you get out of bed, in the shower, during your commute, in the quiet moments before you sleep, that pattern is your destiny dressed up as a thought. Language is the third force and the most underestimated one. The words you use are not just descriptions of your reality. They are the architecture of your reality. Words do not just name what you feel. They shape what you feel, how intensely you feel it, and how long it lasts. Tell me, if something goes wrong today, what do you say to yourself? Do you say you are devastated? Or do you say you are a little disappointed? Do you say you are furious? Or do you say you are a bit frustrated? The word you choose is not just a label. It is a volume dial. Say devastated and your nervous system responds to devastation. Say disappointed and your nervous system calibrates to that. Smaller response, faster recovery, more space to think clearly. I spent 3 months once tracking the language patterns of people who describe themselves as depressed versus people who describe themselves as going through a rough patch. Different language. Dramatically different access to resources, to creativity, to problem-solving capacity, same circumstances. Different words, different lives. Your internal vocabulary is either expanding your world or shrinking it. Every word you habitually use to describe your emotional experience is either giving you more room to move or less. Start paying attention to your words. Not occasionally, constantly. As if your life depends on it, because it actually does. Let me tell you about Sylvester Stallone. Before Rocky, before any of it, he was broke. Not working on something broke. Completely desperate, had to sell his dog broke. At a moment in his life where most people would have made peace with mediocrity, where most people would have found a reason to conclude that this was a sign. He wrote a script in 3 days. He took it to producers. They offered him money for it. Good money. He turned it down. Not because he was crazy, because the offer came with a condition. They wanted someone else to star in it. And Stalin knew something. He knew that if he sold the script and someone else carried his story, the version of himself that he was writing toward would never exist. He was not selling a script. He was deciding who he was going to become. So he walked away from the money multiple times until they agreed to let him star in his own story. Rocky went on to win the Academy Award for Best Picture. But here is what I want you to hear beneath the surface of that story. Stallone was not just protecting a script. He was protecting a belief about himself that the world had not yet confirmed. He was choosing identity before evidence. He was acting as the person he intended to become before he had any proof that person was real. That is the move. That is the exact move that changes everything. Here is what breakthrough actually looks like. People imagine breakthrough as a dramatic moment, a lightning strike, a single conversation, or a single event that reorganizes everything. And sometimes it is. Sometimes there is a moment so acute, so undeniable, that everything shifts at once. But more often, and I want you to hear this, more often, breakthrough is a series of small, unglamorous decisions made in private. In the moments when no one is watching, in the moments when it would be completely understandable to stop. Breakthrough is the conversation you have with yourself at 2 a.m. when the project is not working and every part of you wants to walk away. And you do not walk away. Breakthrough is the morning you do not feel like showing up, and you show up anyway. Breakthrough is the year where nothing seems to be working, and then suddenly, because you did not stop, everything starts working at once. Momentum does not build in visible increments, it builds underground, invisibly, accumulating beneath the surface until one day it erupts, and everyone watching calls you an overnight success. There are no overnight successes. There are only people who did the work in the dark long enough for it to appear in the light. And the distinguishing factor, the thing that separates the people who break through from the people who do not, is not intelligence. It is not resources. It is not even work ethic in the traditional sense. It is standards, what you will and will not accept for yourself. From yourself. Raise your standard and your life reorganizes itself to meet it. Every person who has ever changed their life has had a moment. A specific moment, not a gradual drift, not a slow accumulation of insight, a moment where something inside them crossed a line and did not come back. I call it a defining decision, not a preference, not a goal, not an intention. A defining decision is when you decide at the level of identity, when the decision is not I will try this, or I would like to, or I am going to work toward. The decision is I am this. This is who I am now. This is done. The psychology research on this is extraordinary. People who frame their changes as identity shifts maintain those changes dramatically longer than people who frame them as behaviors. I am a person who runs is more durable than I am trying to run more. I am someone who does not eat sugar holds longer than I am cutting back on sugar. Because behaviors can be negotiated. Identity cannot. When you decide who you are, all the little daily decisions become automatic. You do not need to find motivation every morning because motivated people still need to negotiate with themselves. You do not negotiate with yourself about who you are. So the question is not what do you want to do? The question is who do you want to be? And then live from that place first, not as a destination, as a starting point. Now I want to talk honestly about what gets in the way, because everything I have said so far is true, and I believe it completely, and I have seen it transform hundreds of thousands of lives. And it is also true that change is hard. Real change, not just a good week, not just a motivated Monday, but lasting structural change in who you are and how you live. That is genuinely difficult, not impossible. Difficult. There is a difference. People run into problems not because the principles do not work, but because they underestimate the resistance. Your old identity does not simply step aside when you decide to become something new. It fights. It sends you fear. It sends you doubt. It sends you old stories and familiar voices and the comfortable pull of the way things have always been. This is not failure. This is the process. The resistance is confirmation that the change is real. Water does not encounter resistance in still air. It encounters resistance when it is moving. When you feel the pushback from inside yourself, from your environment, from the people around you who are uncomfortable with the version of you that is emerging. That is not a sign you are failing. That is a sign you are moving. Keep moving. The only people who do not encounter resistance are the people who have stopped. I need to address something that I hear constantly. It is too late for me. I have heard this from people who are 30 years old. I have heard it from people who are 70. And every time I hear it, I ask the same question. Too late for what exactly? Because the idea that there is a window of time in which transformation is possible, and then the window closes, is simply not supported by any evidence I have encountered in 40 years of this work. I worked with a man in his 60s who had spent his entire career in insurance. Safe career, respectable crushing. At 63, he enrolled in architecture school. Everyone in his life told him he was too old. He told me that he found it was the most alive he had ever felt. He graduated at 67. I have seen people rebuild their health at 50, launch businesses at 60, find love for the first time at 70, discover their creative voice at any age you can name. The question is never whether it is possible. The question is whether you are willing to be uncomfortable while it happens, because it will be uncomfortable. Becoming who you are not yet is inherently uncomfortable, and your nervous system is going to interpret that discomfort as danger when it is actually evidence of growth. Train yourself to read discomfort as a signal you are expanding. That one reframe will change the texture of your entire life. Here is what I have learned from the people who are truly fulfilled, not just successful, truly, deeply, sustainably fulfilled. They have all discovered the same thing. At some point, the game of getting the accumulation, the achievement, the proving something to someone reaches a ceiling. Not because it stops feeling good, but because it starts feeling incomplete. And then something shifts. The game changes from getting to giving, not giving instead of achieving. Giving as the context for achieving, building something bigger than yourself, making decisions that will outlast you, measuring your life not just by what you accumulated, but by what you contributed. I am not talking about charity in the conventional sense. I am talking about the orientation of your life. I am talking about waking up and asking not what can I get from today, but what can I give? What can I build? Who can I serve? What problem can I solve that is worth my effort? When that becomes your question, your energy does not deplete. It compounds because you are no longer burning yourself up in the pursuit of something for yourself. You are fueling yourself with something larger than yourself. That is sustainability. That is the source. Every person I have met who is extraordinary at what they do has found a reason beyond themselves to do it. Find yours. I want to give you something practical. Not a theory, not a concept, a practice. Every morning, before you check your phone, before you consume anything, before you let the world make its first demand on your attention, spend 10 minutes on 3 things. First, gratitude. Not a list you recite mechanically, real felt gratitude for 3 specific things. Put your body into it. Let yourself actually feel it. Because gratitude and fear cannot coexist in the same nervous system. The moment you are genuinely grateful, you are physiologically incapable of being in a state of scarcity. Second, clarity. What are you going to make happen today? Not what is on your schedule. What are you going to make happen? One thing, the most important thing, the thing that if you did it and nothing else would still make this a good day. Third, intention. How are you going to show up today? Not what are you going to do? Who are you going to be? Decide in advance. Make it a choice before the day makes it for you. 10 minutes every single morning. Not when you feel motivated, not when things are going well. Every morning, especially the mornings when nothing inside you wants to do it. Those are the mornings it matters most. Ritual is the technology of transformation. The people who change are the people who build the structures that make change inevitable rather than waiting for the feeling that makes change feel possible. Feeling follows structure, always. Let me talk about fear, because everything I have covered today, breaking through the walls, changing your identity, raising your standards, building the practice, all of it will eventually bring you face to face with fear. And I want to reframe fear for you. Fear is not a warning that you should stop. Fear is confirmation that you are approaching something that matters. Genuine fear, not the fear of a car accident, not the fear of actual physical danger, but the fear of being seen, of failing publicly, of trying and not being enough. That fear is pointing at the exact door you need to walk through. I have done thousands of events. I have spoken to rooms of 50,000 people. And before I walk out on stage, I still feel something. some version of what might look like fear from the outside, but I have learned to interpret it as fuel. That energy, the racing heart, the sharpened senses, the heightened awareness, is your biology giving you everything you need to perform at the highest level. The only difference between anxiety and excitement is the story you put on top of the sensation. Same physiological experience, different interpretation, completely different outcome. Tell yourself you are excited. Your brain accepts it. Your performance reflects it. Fear is an invitation. Start treating it like one. Nothing meaningful happens fast. This is the hardest truth in personal development and probably the most important one. We live in a world that has trained us to expect instant results, instant communication, instant entertainment, instant information. And somewhere along the way, we started expecting instant transformation. It does not work that way. Transformation works the way compound interest works. Small deposits made consistently over time produce results that seem disproportionate to the effort, invisible for a long time, and then suddenly unmistakably real. The person who meditates for 10 minutes every day does not feel profoundly different after week 1. After 3 years, they are a different human being. The person who reads for 30 minutes every day does not feel smarter after the first book. After 5 years, the gap between them and the person who did not read is vast. The person who has one honest, vulnerable conversation every week with themselves, with someone they trust, does not transform overnight. After a decade, they know themselves in a way that most people never will. Small things, repeated, over time. That is the engine. Stop asking why you have not changed yet. Start asking whether the small things you are doing today are pointed in the right direction, because they are compounding right now, in whichever direction you have aimed them. I want to close with something I think about often. At the end of a life, not at the end of a good year, not at the peak of an achievement, at the actual end of a life, looking back at the full span of it, people do not talk about what they accumulated. They talk about who they became. They talk about the moments they were brave enough to be honest, the relationships they showed up for, the work they did that mattered to someone, the version of themselves they managed to grow into despite everything that argued against it. Nobody at the end of their life says, I wish I had played it safer. I wish I had taken fewer risks. I wish I had stayed small and comfortable and never made anyone uncomfortable by trying to be something more. Nobody says that. They say, I wish I had trusted myself sooner. I wish I had stopped waiting for permission. I wish I had been brave enough earlier to bet on the version of me I could feel but could not yet prove. You do not have to wait until the end to have that clarity. You can have it right now. Because right now, you are somewhere in the middle of your story. And the middle of a story is exactly where the character decides to change, not before the challenges. In the middle of them, that is where the decision is made. And that decision, your decision, is the only thing that determines how the story ends. So here is what I want to leave you with. You already have what you need. Not all of it, not the skills you have not yet learned, not the relationships you have not yet built, but the essential thing, the capacity, the core, the hunger. That is already inside you. The potential is not something you need to create. It is something you need to stop blocking. Stop blocking it with the story that it is too late. Stop blocking it with the identity that was handed to you by someone who could not see you clearly. Stop blocking it with the certainty you have been using as armor when it is actually a prison. Stop blocking it with the environment that reflects back to you a smaller version of what you are. You are capable of more than you have allowed yourself to believe. Not someday, not when things change. Right now, with what you have, from where you are. The decision is the change, not the action that follows it, not the results that come after it. The decision itself is the moment everything shifts. Make it today. Make it now. Because the version of you that is possible, the one you have glimpsed, the one you have felt pulling at you, the one you have argued yourself out of 100 times, that version of you is not a fantasy. It is an invitation. And you have already decided to answer it.